Welcome to the Paths We Take podcast. I'm your host, Jordan DeSange. Let's hit a path. Hey there, and welcome to the Paths We Take podcast. Today's guest is Briana, and we have a super interesting conversation coming up, actually. This was such an easy conversation. We talk about the mindset, we talk about how powerful our mind can be at getting ourselves where we want to be. We talk about the nervous system, fight or flight response, Briana's journey with bodybuilding, with mindset, with her nervous system, with trying to be better, starting her business. I think this episode is such an important one. It's a space that is emerging and starting to become a lot more known. I think we all know the power of our mind. We all know how we can shift our thoughts to make ourselves better in the long run. And I know you listening are somebody that potentially is that high achiever, wanting more, wanting to strive to be better, do better. And I feel you. That is somebody that I am as a person as well. And I myself learned a lot from this conversation. I think you will too. It was just a very good, wholesome conversation about how powerful our mind is. So let's get into this episode. Let's get into the chat and we can go from there. All right, team. Quick shout out to today's sponsor because they've genuinely been a game changer for me personally, and that is YouFoods. So here's the thing, no matter what your goals are, fat loss, muscle building, training for something big, or honestly just trying to survive a busy week, YouFoods has meals that actually taste amazing. And I'm not talking about those sad frozen meals that taste like fake ingredients and disappoint you every single time. These meals taste fresh, they taste real, and they don't feel like you're on a meal plan at all. I literally look forward to them. But the real reason that I'm obsessed personally is time. My time is everything, and saving literally 3 to 5 hours a week from grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning the kitchen, that honestly is priceless to me. Those hours go back into my training, they go back into this podcast, into the other podcasts that I produce, and just my sanity as well. So, if you've been thinking about giving pre made meals a go, or you just want to make your life so much easier, use my link in the show notes and you'll get a free box of meals to try out. Seriously, try it. If you're anything like me, you'll wonder why you didn't start sooner. Well, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me this morning and chatting with me. How are you going, Briana?
I'm good. I was just saying, I'm just waking up a little bit.
Yes,
So.
I know. I think we all are really. And I think it's difficult too because when it's gray outside, like you feel a bit sleepy. And
Oh, totally.
for me, like my routine normally in the morning is wake up, go to the gym, go for a run and everything. But this morning I was like, oh, it's going to be gray all day. Maybe I'll like sleep in, do all of that a little bit later because I don't know, you just feel a little lazy or tired sometimes and you need it really. It's a Saturday, so why not? Now, the first question that I like to start off with on the podcast here is if the listener right now listening had an autobiography in front of them and it was your story basically, what are some cliff notes or what are some paths you think that that person would read that really sticks out to you?
Oh, what a great question. I would say my primary school years, heavily bullied. A lot of like real uncertainty in friendship groups. So, kind of like that dynamic of sort of feeling like people were close friends and then from one day to the next they'd just switch on me. So that created like a real hypervigilance for me. I would say my years bodybuilding, competitive bodybuilding. So obviously, I think for me that created like it forced me to really find myself, and it was a real journey of like finding my grit, and finding my certainty in myself and learning how to really take up space, especially from primary school years, being so heavily bullied for, a lot of it was for standing out, for doing well in sport, for doing well at school. So then kind of like having to own my bigness, getting on a bodybuilding stage. And I would say probably the more recent years for me, really stepping into like speaking on stages and like owning my work, which again, in its own way is like, again, owning a new level of my bigness. So yeah, they would be the cliff notes.
Okay. Well, that's quite interesting because I think too, somebody that goes through a moment of bullying, let's say at a young age, like I think sometimes they teach you, I have a similar story, like heavily bullied at a young age. And I think for me, thinking back, it taught me to be quiet, to shrink myself and, to not be seen really, because similar to what you were saying, it was often in instances where you were seen that you got bullied. So it really puts you in a little bit of a box. And I think for someone like yourself, when you're saying that you go up on stage in bodybuilding and, it's the complete opposite, really. You're on stage front and square, basically. And then you're now speaking and you're now out there, basically. Like, the years kind of growing up, the years kind of getting out of that quietness, that smallness, what did that look like for you?
Well, I think like for you, you said that it kind of taught you to shrink. It was sort of a mixture of both for me. Okay. Like I think it created in me this like hypervigilance of tracking what was right and what was wrong, and really like tracking what I almost became a bit of a chameleon through through my high school years and so on, of like really starting to understand what sides of me worked well with certain friendship groups and what didn't, which looking back, I'm like, oh, that's a little bit sad that I kind of learned how to shapeshift. But I also think it's part of my magic now. A lot of my work is around human behavior. A lot of my work is around, understanding people and why they do what they do. So yeah, it was kind of this mixture for me of like learning the right moments to shrink in order to stay safe, in order to fit in. But at the same time, it created this fight in me of like, no, you're not going to tell me to be smaller. And so, yeah, it kind of, I guess it was really a bit of a journey of like trial and error. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's I guess like everybody goes through it and experiences it differently, right? And comes out of it a bit differently as well, because I think too, like a lot of the times, like I would say for myself, maybe in the last 5-6 years is when I've really grown and come out of that really. But the first 25, basically, I think I still was that small, scared kind of person really. Yeah. And I don't know what flipped the switch, but I think through experience, through learning and through your journey, you kind of, everybody has a different path and a different journey to come out of it. And whether it be, let's say 30 years, 40 years, I think it's quite individual, case to case really. But for you, kind of then going onto stage and then kind of becoming, I guess, a little bit more out there in a sense, what did that look like for you? What was the path for that direction? So how did you get into bodybuilding? How did you get into all of these other things?
Yeah, well, I think I've always wanted a big life. Like I've always said, that movie, I think it's called Groundhog Day, where it's like, he wakes up and he's living the same day over and over again. That was like my greatest fear. Coming out of high school, I was like, I don't want to live that, and I look at a lot of people, and not to make, like your mainstream path wrong. It works for a lot of people, but for me, that sounds like torture. The thought of like getting up, going to a job, coming home, going to bed, doing the same thing, and doing that for like 50 years or whatever. You sounded like torture to me. So I think coming out of high school, I mean, when I was finishing up high school, I was hanging out with a lot of gangs. I was associating with like a lot of gangs and a lot of, a lot of partying, a lot of just, I guess, like finding myself through like reckless outlets. And for me, I realized that was largely based around numbing. That was the bigness in me trying to avoid that and trying to kind of like overlay it, and push it down. And that wasn't working for me. I was like, I'm not happy. I looked around at the people that I was associating with. I'm like, they're clearly not happy either. So there's got to be something else. And so, thankfully, funnily enough, the guy that I was dating at the time, who was kind of the connection to the associating with gangs, was also on his own weight loss journey. And at the time, I was living on McDonald's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And he actually said to me, like, I need your help here. Like, I can't be trying to lose weight while you're, eating Macca's for every meal. And so it kind of started for me with supporting him, and so we did this kind of like health kick together. And it was kind of this interesting dance, and I look back on it because the weekends were like drugs and alcohol and, partying and whatever else. But the weekdays were like him and I learning how to train at the gym and, eating really clean and being on this quite strict weight loss journey for him and me sort of supporting. And then, there was this moment where I kind of realized that a lot of my challenges in life were stemming from the toxicity of that relationship. It was quite abusive. And all I had coming out of that relationship, I'd really been quite like separated from friends and family and so on through that relationship. And so I realized when I finally found the courage to end things with him, all I had was the gym. And thankfully it was my relationship to the gym and to healthy eating and all of those sorts of things that was built through the toxic relationship, funnily enough. So I think I just dove all the way in and, started, just through social media, seeing these like women who were, I guess, influencers in the bodybuilding world. And I was like, I wonder if that's something that I could do. I wonder if that's the next step for me. So went to an info evening and found myself a coach, and all of a sudden had signed up to do this comp prep, and that was that.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's what I love about the gym. I think every single person in there has a different story and a different why, right? Like, I think sometimes we can get in our heads looking around the gym. It can be an intimidating space and whatnot, but like, you have someone like you with your story, you have other people out there all in there for something similar, to better themselves, or, even if it isn't to better yourself or just starting the fitness journey, like the fact that somebody's in there is kind of the start and the callus of all of this kind of stuff. So like, I find that interesting that everybody in the gym has a different path, a different story, really. Because like, you just don't know, and it can be an intimidating space just being there and looking around. And, if you have people that compete alongside just people that are going to the gym just to better themselves, it can be quite scary or frightening sometimes for some people. But what do you think bodybuilding and that whole scene gave you?
Oh, so much. It took a lot from me. But it gave a lot as well. It's a tough sport. It's all encompassing. But I think what I gained from it was I really learned how to walk my own path. Again, like I found bodybuilding at a time when I was still transitioning from, like away from a lot of partying, a lot of drugs, a lot of, like my social circle was largely based around alcohol. And so I do remember like people just not getting it. Like I'd show up to like social outings, not necessarily like evening social outings, not parties or anything like that, just day-to-day social outings with my Tupperware, And I remember consistently having people kind of like, like look in at what I was eating and sort of like question it and, and like, that looks horrible. And like, here, just have a cookie, or like, like have some milk in your coffee. Like it's not going to, create an issue, down to like, I remember someone literally trying to shove a meat pie in my face one day. And so, yeah, like I really felt a lot of, I want to say judgment, but just like, I don't get it. Why is she doing this? And so, yeah, I always felt like there was a lot of kind of talk about me, happening. Again, not necessarily bad, but just I knew that I was the center of a lot of conversations. And so, yeah, it really taught me like, if this is what I want to do, I have to learn to be okay with people not understanding. I have to be okay with people having these judgments or these narratives that aren't necessarily the truth. So yeah, I think, and and then on top of that, of course, I mean, bodybuilding is so much like it's grit. It's your entire world is, the timing of your life is based around your comp prep. And so, even just from like a discipline and a time management perspective, like I really had to figure out very quickly, like how to manage, and juggle all of these different aspects of my life. So I think it really set me up for, in a lot of ways, like the entrepreneurial journey,
Yeah. I think the resilience is something that like is so important, because I think like, I mean, I didn't think back to let's say that social aspect of it, like feeling that judgment, feeling that, oh, why are you doing this? Because I think that also builds a bit of resilience. Like you have to push past that. You have to not give in to the peer pressure, really. I think similarly, me as a runner, for example, like training for a marathon or an ultra or whatever, like I'm training sometimes 4 or 5 hours a day, and not a lot of people get that. Not a lot of people get, oh, why can't you come out for dinner, or why can't you do this or that? And I think too, like it's so much easier sometimes to just give in, really. But I think you have to have that resilience, and you always have to have kind of that goal setting and be strong enough to be clear enough with your goals. I think that's important, because like I think too, like it's quite easy to give in if you don't have that long-term goal, or if you don't have that, that outcome that you're looking for, really. And it just all goes back, I think, to that resilience, really, that's built. When it comes to then, competing, when it comes to getting on stage, where did things go from there, basically?
Well, I mean, coming off the stage, and this is where I sort of say, I mean, it's this interesting thing, right? This is the paradox. Like I say, bodybuilding took from me, and it did. Like it really, there's things that I'm still health wise recovering from my bodybuilding days, which was 10 plus years ago. So, coming out of comps, dealing with a lot of body dysmorphia, like going from being so shredded to really like visually standing out in a crowd, to essentially going back to looking like a regular person. That was really, it was like when you've been to such an extreme, anything less than that felt like excessively the other way, like I remember going back to like probably a similar body weight to what I am now and feeling like a whale. I felt like to everyone else, that people were looking at me thinking, oh my God, like she's stacked on the weight, when really I just, put on maybe a couple of kilos of water weight, and again, just looked like a regular person once again, and yeah, dealing with a lot of like food challenges. That was probably the main one. Like I remember the day after my comp, we had a photo shoot. We had a team photo shoot lined up. And our coach had said, feel free, like go home, have like a nice dinner off the plan, have a breakfast off the plan, like let yourself fill up a little bit, because, like you've been so depleted for so long that like it's only going to make you look better for the photo shoot. And so I did that. But then it was like this ravenous hunger of like, even when my stomach was so bloated, I just could not stop eating. And now like I look back and I'm like, oh, I know that was the survival part of me. Kind of going, okay, well, we've sort of been starved. We need to make sure we fill up as much as possible, in case this happens again. But it was like, I've never experienced anything like it, just not being able to stop myself from eating. And so that was really scary. And it went on for, months upon months upon months. So it was really this kind of like journey of finding my balance point again, from going to such an extreme to then go back to just regular life, and figuring out whether like, was this still a sport that I wanted to be engaged in, or, is it too toxic? And, yeah, there were so many layers to it. And having said all of that, I say it took from me, but it was also the setup for something even better. So, there was a lot to gain in the losses,
All right, let's get into today's sponsor. Most activewear is made to look good standing still, but the Cover House is built for movement. Now, the Cova House is brand new Australian running brand. It is for chasing PBs. It is for training. It is for your first marathon. It is for your first 5K, your first 1K. Whatever it might be, the Cova House is for running. Your gear should move with you, not against you. So the Cova House is built by runners. It is tested by runners, meaning that all of the garments are tested so that runners like it, runners love it, and runners would want to wear it during their training, racing, whatever it might be. Every piece is designed with either lightweight fabrics, super stretchy, unrestricted movement, and just all day comfort in mind. So if you wanted to wear the things all day, you could. There are no distractions, no overcomplicated designs, just performance driven apparel that actually feels good and looks good to wear too. So visit kova.house, KOVA.HAUS, and you can score yourself some great brand new running gear. They have recently launched, they have a new singlet and a new pair of shorts out currently, with a whole bunch of other things to come over the next 6 months. Thank you to the Kova House for sponsoring today's episode. And I definitely recommend this to anybody listening. Yeah. How did your nervous system work come out of that then? So like where did you get your entrepreneurial side from there basically?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my entrepreneurial side was sort of, I think it was always there, like I think I've got one of those brains that just, I was never going to do the normal 9 to 5 thing. But, so when I was bodybuilding, part of what got me into bodybuilding kind of on the side was that I'd started my personal training certifications, and so I had this internal narrative, which I look back on now and it's so ridiculous, but I had this internal narrative that I needed to look a particular way as a personal trainer, and that like I wasn't shredded enough. I wasn't, I didn't have enough muscle. And also at the same time, I was working with a lot of weight loss clients. And someone said to me one day, Brie, you don't know what it's like to go on this weight loss journey. Like you've been fit your whole life. You've been skinny your whole life. Like you don't know. And I was like, well, they are right. Like prior to that, I was partying and eating fast food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I am someone who doesn't matter how much I eat, I don't really gain that much weight. So part of the intention with the bodybuilding comp was to actually come to understand what it was like for my weight loss clients to lose a lot of weight and to be on these kind of stricter diets. So yeah, the transition post bodybuilding into, more of the nervous system work that I do now and the coaching work was really born from, on one hand, my own struggles. Like I really would say I was so deep in survival mode post comp. Really trying to figure out who the hell am I? If I'm not a bodybuilder, who am I? If I'm not the girl that goes out partying with her friends, who am I? And then wanting to pull myself out of that hole to overcome this body dysmorphia, the food challenges, all of that. And at the same time, working with these, my personal training clients, I realized really quickly how much their journey to lose weight and keep it off was, again, around their willingness to be seen. And so like there were clients where the weight would just drop off and they would keep it off. There were clients where, I'd do the same kind of thing with them and the weight wouldn't move, or like they'd be so resistant to it. Some clients would lose the weight and then put it back on and then some. And so it was just like, what is this? What is this thing? It's not just the physical transformation, because I'd had the physical transformation. I'd had clients who'd had the physical transformation, and yet mentally and emotionally it had scrambled things for myself. It had scrambled things for clients. And so it was, what's the thing underneath the thing? And so it was just this deep journey of, I guess, just getting my hands on everything I could around mindset, around, our emotional world, around psychology. And yeah, slowly over time, I sort of came across the terminology of the nervous system and specifically polyvagal theory. And that was the thing. When I found it, I was like, oh, this is the missing piece.
Yeah, because I think that's the missing link in a lot of things. Like, I think we are now coming to a space where we're realizing stuff like that, where we're realizing the power of the mind, the power of mindset, and the power of the nervous system, and all of those things, because I think that's a gap in so many markets and so many disciplines right now. I think, to my background in physiotherapy, physiotherapists are very good at diagnosing, at treating, at doing the hands-on stuff, and looking at things more objectively. But when it comes to the subjective and when it comes to the mind, really, there is a huge gap. And I think a lot of the times that is a missing link to kind of a full holistic approach to helping someone, really. Because like you were saying, you can have somebody and they can keep the weight off, or they can stay injury free or whatever, but then you could have cookie cutter scenario, person too, and it be the complete opposite. And I think too, like, you know, if you're looking at everything and you're doing the same thing, cool, but like we're not focusing on the mind a lot of the time. So I find this area quite interesting because I think there is a lot more coming out. Where did this all start from you? So like, I know you were saying that it started with your clients and it started with yourself really, but when did you really start diving into it and wanting to practice and starting to practice it?
Oh, I think it was just sort of, I don't think there was like a clear start and
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, it was,
Like most good things, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 I think I just fell into it. Like it was, I had a lot of PT clients who would start to say to me, you know, like, I guess we would just have conversations. We would just have conversations about what was coming up for them around food, around their body image, you know, and there would be things that I'd be learning for my own sake, or, you know, like they might come to me with a specific something and I'd go away and do a bit of research, and then I would, you know, they'd come to me with something and I'd just mention something that I'd learned. And so I started seeing like all of a sudden their results are starting to fast track, or they might be maintaining them with a little bit more ease. And yeah, over time, it just sort of, it was kind of this natural, effortless transition from personal training. And I guess over time I realized this isn't really what I love. Like it's part of it. I enjoy the physical transformation, but it feels surface level. And so bit by bit, I just started having more personal training clients start to ask me for coaching. And yeah, it was just sort of less of them and more of these over time. And then eventually it was just a clear step away. So yeah, I kind of really just fell in.
Yeah. So for the person listening right now, when we talk about the nervous system, when we talk about all of this stuff, what exactly does that mean?
So looking at it's your fight, flight, freeze response. Okay. So yeah, I'm looking at the way we as individuals relate to stress. The way we relate to pressure, the way we relate to being seen and like going for the things that we want in life. So you know, everyone has a unique nervous system. It's like your fingerprints. No two people are the same. And so maybe what triggers you into a stress response, or more specifically a fight response, so it brings out maybe like more of that sense of like that fiery kind of getting after it energy, for example. That same situation might throw me into freeze, and that's when procrastination or avoidance or shutdown, or, you know, like a depressive state, unable to get out of bed, you know, it might bring that up for me. So it's basically teaching people how to track, first of all, what their states look like, so that they're actually able to go, okay, this is, if they're in avoidance, oh, this is a freeze response. It's not something wrong with me, you know, because I think that's part of the challenge. When we shame ourselves for our natural survival responses, we trigger off more of the same. But, you know, so recognizing, okay, this is, excuse me, this is my freeze response. This is part of me not feeling safe and doing what my system thinks it needs to do in order to stay safe. And so then giving someone the tools to then go, okay, well, how do we kind of like anchor ourselves back into this sense of safety, that yes, things may be stressful, but there's no tiger chasing me. You know, there's nothing that I need to, there's no life or death situation at play. And so, you know, we can still carry the stress, but keep on moving forward towards what we actually do desire for ourselves.
That's very interesting, because I think too, like, I think these are things that people are trying to focus on and work on these days. But I think it's hard because like there's so much information out there, but also like it's still a new concept and we don't know how to engage and how to activate, right? Like I hear all the time, I talk with mates and everything about, you know, oh, I'm journaling, oh, I'm listening to this podcast, I'm doing all of this. And I think like those kind of things are great because you're probably starting the work and the foundation. But I think too, like, if you're not, like you were saying, if you're not focusing on what works for you, or if you're not focusing on, because like what would work for me might not work for you, it might put you in lockdown or whatever it might be. So I think like that's the thing, is it can't be a cookie cutter like, oh, let's go buy this journal and hand it out to 100 people and that's going to fix someone, really. And that's where I think things are a bit muddled right now. We're also living in like a super stressful world right now. So I think like stress is something that's coming up for a lot of people right now. I think they're probably going through a lot of fight or flight responses, and they're trying to figure out ways to help themselves and to get through it all, really. Are you noticing more people coming to see you because of stress? And what kind of things do you think are I don't want to say the most common, but what kind of things are people trying to work through when it comes to stress these days?
Well, I think we inherently like live in a world now that is more stressful. You know, like there's things that we have to consider nowadays that you know, our grandparents, I mean, they had their own set of challenges, but I think life was a lot slower back then. I saw a stat the other day, and forgive me because I can't recall the number. So we kind of missed the punchline a little bit, but it was, you know, the amount of information that we take on in a single hour, like my grandmother would not have taken on in a single day, you know? And so I think that's a massive part of it. Like the world, we're still living with a nervous system that's built to sit in a cave amongst our tribe and eat berries, you know, and here we are now with like our phones going off, you know, all these notifications, AI, like the speed of AI, like everything is speeding up so much. You know, all we have to do is turn the TV on in the morning or log on to Google and we get all of this information about like these tragedies that are happening on the other side of the world, when we're built to only know what's happening within our local tribe, you know. And so I think just living in and of itself is a high stimulus, stressful environment, you know, for anyone. And so we're kind of on the back foot already. And so I think that's why nervous system regulation work is so important, because it's like it's setting our environment up in a way that to the best of our ability we can mitigate, you know, that constant stimulus, you know, like for me it's the little things, like I don't have any of my notifications on, you know, and so my phone's not consistently pulling at me. I'm not consistently getting that little dopamine hit. I'm not getting distracted each time my phone goes off. If I'm using my phone with intention. And so just like even that little tweak in how I relate to my environment sets me up with all of this spaciousness, you know? And so, yeah, it's, I think for a lot of people who are just kind of on that autopilot mode or are in a place of struggle, it's those little wins of just that tiny bit of spaciousness so that they can start to shift their focus from just getting by to like, well, what do I actually want for myself? Like if I had it all my way, like what would my ideal experience of my life be?
Yeah. Is this something like, because I think that's such an important fact, really, that like we have access to the entire world in our pocket these days, right? Like I think overstimulation is something that, yeah, everybody's been dealing with for 5-10 years now, really. Because like you were saying, like I think back to when I was a kid, like maybe mom and dad would have the news on, but even the news only reported maybe what happened in like your city or maybe your country, really. And that was that. You didn't really know what was going on across the world. Like from Canada, I would have no clue what was going on here. But now, like, I know everything that's going on back home. I know everything that's going on in America or, you know, the UK or whatever, really. And I think like small little steps to deregulate is quite important. I've something similar. Like I don't have my phone in the bedroom. I try to like not check my phone within the first like hour of waking up. Like small things like that I think are so important, but I think too like it's about putting these steps in place, really. What are some like, do you think that it is like for people's personalities and stuff like that? Do you think it is achievable to, I guess, deregulate to that scale? Because I think to myself, for example, like one of the other reasons why I don't have notifications and all of that, like I have my goal and I don't want to get distracted, really. So that like works in my hand, really. But I can understand not everybody has that mindset. Some people are fine. Like my sister, for example, loves her 9-to-5 job, really likes going to work, coming home and, you know, doing her thing, kind of your general population kind of stuff these days. But for me, similar to you, I was always like, no, I want something more. And to get that, I think you have to put certain things in play, like the things that you were mentioning and that I was mentioning. What are kind of some strategies that everybody can maybe start with to help deregulate their nervous system? Because I know that's a broad topic and that's a broad thing, but how do people start going about it?
Yeah. Well, I always suggest, and this is an interesting thing that I see a lot. Whenever I take on a new client, the first thing I'll ask is like, okay, well, what do you want for yourself? And it boggles my mind how, and I mean, part of this is it's human instinct, right? Like we look for all of the things that we don't want. But the answer that I get most of the time is, oh, well, it's some variation of, well, I don't want to feel stressed. I don't want to feel, alone. Whatever it may be, I don't want to be struggling for money. And it's, I don't want to be. It's not, I want this. And so when we look at, if we simplify it, if you're typing into Google, like, I don't want a red car, you're going to get a bunch of red cars, and so when we're so attached to what we don't want, that's actually all we're looking at. The exact thing that we don't want is what we get more of. And so it's and this is from the macro all the way down to the micro, from what you want for your life as a whole, all the way down to like, well, how do I navigate this stressful situation? The North Star is, well, what do I want? Like, how do you want to feel? How do you want to navigate this? Who do you want to know yourself as through this situation? Because that becomes the thing that we can then tangibly kind of like, if you know where you're going, you can figure out how to get there. If you have no idea where you're going, you're just driving around in circles. And so, if we go right down to the micro, if there's a stressful dynamic, it's, well, how do you want to feel through this? And that's where we're taking into account that individuality piece. Because for you, if you're very goal orientated, you don't want the distractions. Whereas someone more like your sister, who maybe is a little bit more happy to, I would say, it sounds like consistency and stability and certainty are important to her. So what she's wanting in those moments will probably be very different for you, And so it's, if we know what we want, then we can start to build the map to get there. Where rather than just kind of like, oh, well, I just don't want to feel stressed anymore. Well, what do you want in its place? Do you want, because for some people, it's like the stress is actually the thing they love. They love the adrenaline. They love the feeling of like overcoming something. So we don't want to get rid of the stress. We just want to change the way we relate to it. For someone else who likes more of like a comfortable, slower life, then they're gonna navigate it really differently to someone who wants a fast pace, kind of challenging life.
How does that work? Because that sparked some interest to me, because this year, like, I try every year to create goals really for myself. And this year I told myself really that like, I want to be more social. I want to meet more people. I want to feel a little bit more fulfilled when it comes to my social circle and just, I guess, being a bit more happier overall, really, because I've always been the more reserved person. And I think, like you were saying, I've always told myself, oh, I don't want to be lonely. I don't want this. I don't want that. Or if I'm going out dating, oh, I don't want this X, Y, and Z in a person or whatever. And like you're saying, that's what you attract, really. And I've really found I can't believe it's already been 6 months of the year, but the last like 6 months, like my social circle and, my friendships have grown, and even my current friendships have grown stronger because, I think just the power of saying, I want this has been so powerful, really. How does that really work? Because I think I know it's hard to say how that works really, but like, I just find that so interesting because like I've really noticed that the moment that I'm starting to go after and say and reshift, like you were saying, things are starting to happen a bit more than they ever have been, really.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is, and forgive me because my brain hasn't caught up to me yet this morning, but so there's a particular reticular activating system. It's a part of your brain that basically seeks out whatever we're seeking. So again, you know, if I said to you, how many red cars did you drive past this morning on your way here? You probably wouldn't be able to tell me. Versus like maybe as you leave, you'll unconsciously kind of track the red cars, right? So it's that part on a brain level, it's that part coming online. So whatever we're seeking is the thing that we start to see more of. It's the same as like if you've ever, you know, you might buy a new car and you want that car because it's a different color to, you know, the car that everyone else has. And then all of a sudden you start seeing that colored car everywhere, right? But from a nervous system perspective, the nervous system learns through experience. So anything that we haven't had the experience of before, we'd register as being unsafe because it's uncertain, it's unfamiliar. We can't kind of like track what's going to happen. And so I say to people, you know, if you want to have a different experience, you've got to make the experience of that new experience so real within your body that it becomes familiar, you know? And so, and again, it's human instinct. It's that survival part of us to go, these are the things that I don't want. So these are the things that I have to track so that I can try, you know, I don't want to be chased by the tiger. So I need to be aware of the tiger so that I don't get chased by the tiger, right? But if we're focused on the thing that we don't want, that's what's, you know, it's the feeling of the things that we don't want that we're consistently running through our system, you know, and people can be so well versed in like, oh, I know what loneliness feels like because that's the thing that I'm trying to avoid. Or I know what feeling small feels like because that's the thing that I'm trying to avoid. And, you know, people can sit there and give me like these tangible, palpable, you know, stories of the things that they don't want. But then when I say, well, what do you want? They can't tell me. And so I always say you've got to make the felt experience of what you do want more real than the experience of what you don't want. Because then it starts to become familiar to your system. So in your case, you know, you're probably well versed in what loneliness feels like because it's the thing that you're avoiding. But if instead you can go, okay, well, I want a life that, just for example, you know, I have these deep connections. I have the kind of connections where I feel like, you know, like I'm seen, and there, you know, it sparks these conversations where it's like two souls eye to eye, you know, like sharing something meaningful, sharing something that lights them up, you know, and the kind of friendships where we've got each other's back and we're working as a team. And, you know, like you can hear in that, it's like, oh, I'm starting to feel what that would feel like. And so again, when you know where you're going, you can create it, you can create the map to get there, but you're also training your system of, I can start to connect with what this feels like. And if we do that with enough repetition, that becomes the norm. Right? That becomes the nervous system's like natural state. And so then we start to call in experiences that match that. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And like, I also understand, like, if you're listening right now and you're rolling your eyes and like, oh, this is cheesy. I was you once. Like, I get it. It sounds cheesy. But then I also think like, I see TikToks or Reels or whatever every so often of the high achiever, the business owner, that successful quote unquote person, or the athlete, the Olympian, whatever it might be. And they're saying exactly what you're saying. They're saying that they wanted it so bad that they made it happen, really. And I think like a lot of us look at that person and like find that inspirational, but then, you know, are listening to something like this and are like, well, I can't do that myself, really, right? Like, I think it's so interesting because we always compare sometimes ourselves to the quote unquote successful person, and oh, they might just be lucky, or they might have something that I don't, or whatever. But it sounds like when you listen to these successful people that they just wanted it, really, right? And they had that different mindset, really, for getting themselves to where they are right now, basically. When it comes to that person that is telling themselves, oh, that's not me, I can't get there, what do you think that person needs to shift to reframe, oh, wait, no, I can actually get there?
That's difficult to answer without having a specific person in front of me.
All right. Yeah. So if I was, for example, you know, I was the type of person, and I've worked on it a lot in the past, that, you know, when it comes to my business, I liked to compare to a lot of other running brands, a lot of running companies, and, Nike, for example. And I always didn't like, this has been in the back of my mind something that I've wanted to do for 10 years really, but I think every year I would say or tell myself, no, I can't do it because how am I going to be as big as Nike? How am I going to do this? How I'm going to do that? And I would have a long list of things to talk myself out of going for the thing, really. And it wasn't until recently that the last 18 months that I think I shifted things and was like, no, actually, I can do it. Like I might not be Nike overnight. I might not be Nike in 10 years even, but, I think what's holding me back from just starting, really. So if you had someone like me who always has a long list of saying to themselves, no, I can't start this thing, I can't do this thing, what do you think that person needs to do to work around that?
Well, your example is beautiful because, I mean, it sounds like what was happening for you was a bit of a freeze response, right? So, it's that, well, even the internal narrative of like, oh, like I can't do that. I can't be as big as Nike. Like that is freeze. That's our dorsal, it's called our dorsal vagus response, our freeze response. So it's hopelessness and like self-depreciation is a symptom of a freeze response. And so it sounds like initially the threat was so big. Like Nike, way too big. I can't fight against that. I can't run away from it. So I'm just not going to do anything. Right. So if we look at, and again, your nervous system can't tell the difference between real life or death situations or just, like this goal that we want to go for that, for whatever reason feels too big. And so, if we liken that to a tiger's chasing you and you've tried to fight against it, you've tried to run away from it. It's too fast. It's too powerful. You're going to play dead. You're going to play dead and try and camouflage and hope that it gets bored and it leaves you alone or it gets distracted or, that the threat eventually passes. And so that's what you were doing with, taking on Nike, essentially. The threat's too big. I'll wait for it to pass. So what you did was, it sounds like you've chunked it right down, right? So you've gone, okay, well, I may not make it in 10 years. I may, it may take longer than 10 years. It may never get there, right? And we just take one step. So you've taken this giant threat of this, massive, strong, fast tiger, and you've shrunk it down into like a little house kitten, right? And so now you can start to actually like navigate it. And so, I always say when there's a freeze response, when there's procrastination, when there's avoidance, when there's self-depreciation, then it's the threat's too big. You've got to make the threat smaller, so that then it is just a matter of like day one, take one small step. Day two, take one small step. And then all of a sudden you find yourself, over 6 months, like you're not where you started, but you're building capacity. You're building self-trust. You're building the ability to be seen. You're building, the ability to navigate the challenges that pop up. And so, what started as these tiny steps start to become these giant leaps that still feel like baby steps. Yeah.
All right, you guys, ReYourRun is one of my favorite sunglasses brands here in Australia. They sell performance-driven sunglasses that look good, that are super crystal clear, but also have some amazing quality to them as well. It is another Australian-based brand. They are based out of Sydney. And they just sell some great looking sunglasses that can be worn for running, cycling, just walking, whatever it might be. They have something for everybody. Recently, they have just launched a brand new colorway through all of their sunglasses out there on the market. So you can get gold ones, you can get blue ones, they have pink ones. I literally have 3 or 4 different colors now. And I have not been wearing anything else for my runs. What I love about the ReYourRun Sunnies is that they adapt to the changes in light that you go through while you're running. So when you're running, it's so annoying needing to always take off your sunglasses because you're going through a shady part and then you're going to the sun and this and that. These sunglasses are built to adapt to the changes of light so that you can just keep them where they are and not need to have to worry about taking them on, putting them off, whatever it might be. Definitely check out Rio Run. You could also use code Jordan10 to save yourself some money as well. So thank you, Ree, for providing that code. And score yourself some great sunnies. Thank you, guys. No, I love that. And I think like you kind of have to take it step by step, really, because like it's just the easiest way, I think, to do things. And like you were saying, like I think sometimes we think of things like this behemoth, this massive thing, and that's scary for a lot of people, really. And yeah, unless you take it step by step, this is coming from experience at least, like it's really not going to be achievable sometimes, really. And I think before I want to get into your story and how you've worked it into your life, really, you're a good person to ask because we have a lot of athletes that listen to this podcast, a lot of endurance athletes, triathletes, that kind of space, really. And I think in those kind of fields, the nervous system is quite important as well, because, you know, when you're out on the course or when you're out doing something, it's all in the mind a lot of the times, really. You know, we have the fight and fright response. I think like when it comes to endurance sport, a lot of the time people talk themselves out of it because they don't think that they can run for an hour. They don't think that they can be on a bike for this longer. You know, it's always, oh, well, I can't do that because like, you know, I just can't, really. So like when it comes to endurance sport, when it comes to athletes, really, how do you think athletes' minds are different, or how do you think they need to really think about their sport or you know, their activity, really, to set themselves up for success?
Big question. What angle do I want to take that one from? I mean, again, it's like I think at the forefront is the why. You know, like I know it's almost like eye-rolling cliche, but it really is the simple stuff, you know, like when you know why, you know, and you can start to, again, build that self-concept, build the nervous system that's familiar with what you do want. When you can make that so real, then it does just become like this step-by-step journey, you know. But I think where a lot of athletes trip themselves up is that they don't realize that they're doing it for other people.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask, really, because like I think you have to have a strong why, but like a lot of people's whys are, oh, I need to prove somebody else wrong. I need to prove, you know, like I need to, this person is doing this or whatever. Like a lot in the athlete world, and I've done this in the past as well. It's very comparison based to the other people out there. So like, does that affect people's, like, if that's the why, does that affect an athlete's success?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, if you look at the energy of provership, of needing to prove yourself, it's defensive, which is a fight response. And so when we, you know, like, and so our survival responses, they're not only like a tangible state emotionally and mentally in terms of our internal dialogue and the way that we feel, but they also affect us physiologically. So we start to see our recovery, you know, takes a hit, our sleep takes a hit. The way our muscles fire takes a hit, you know, like tension patterns and bracing patterns in the body. We you know, the tissue of the body becomes kind of like more sticky and like rigid, you know. And so if we look at athletes, it's if they're trying to do the thing from needing to prove themselves, then they're in fight, which is then impacting their recovery. It's impacting nutrients absorption, all of those sorts of things. And so it's, you know, right from the top all the way down, it's going to impact the way that they perform. And so, you know, I think it is why it's so important for athletes to take the time to like really get underneath why they're doing something, you know. And for some, I mean, it's this interesting thing, right? And this probably isn't the best marketing for me, but it's something that I see often. Athletes will come to me saying, you know, like, I want to be a world champion. And we'll start digging into, okay, why do you want to be a world champion? And then they get to the point where they're like, oh, I'm just doing this because that's what I think I need to do in order for me to feel loved by dad, as an example. And then all of a sudden they're like, I don't want to do this sport anymore, right? And so it's this scary thing of like, when they get underneath it, it completely changes their path. And like, that is frightening, and there's this momentary sense of, who am I, like, what do I want for myself, all of that. But the beautiful thing about it is that it actually puts you on your true path. So yeah, I think it's important to really know your why and the why underneath the why.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said, like it puts you on your true path sometimes, because I think if you take the doing it for somebody else out there, it also makes sometimes your relationship with maybe that activity a bit stronger. Or also, like you were saying, you find something that you've built a bit better of a relationship with, really, because it's taken that thing away from it, really. Like I think too, like I think back to personally this last year, I've probably been the most successful in running when it comes to PBs, or when it comes to just being happy with my performance or whatnot. And I think that's because the last 12, 16 months, I've been less so, oh, I need to do this to prove, that I can to X, Y, and Z people, or that I need to be seen or whatever it might be. It's like, no, well, I'm going out to run because I love it. I'm going out to run and race because I love that experience and because my friends are there and this and that. And I think back to even a couple of weeks ago, there was a race that I did, and, old me would have been like, oh, these people are going a lot faster than me, which I know I can beat them, really. Let's just go out there and prove that I can beat them, basically, and prove to all of these people that I can, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, that race that I did, I knew that I was just going out to run it. I knew I was just going out to have fun and to join the group, really. And I think like letting go of that made the whole experience a lot better. Made me feel better after, really. And also, I mean, I got to have like just a fun morning, really, because like I wasn't going out there and trying to prove myself to anybody, which at the end of the day, like, it doesn't really matter, I think, a lot of the times. But that makes me think, when it comes to the competitive side of things, because I think a lot of people are competitive, really. And it doesn't need to be just with sport. I think a lot of people are competitive with business or this and that, really. I was having this conversation with other people, and they were saying that, when they're out, let's say for a run or whatever, they can get quite competitive, and they can let that ruin their run, really, because they're not really doing what the plan was that session. They let the competitive side over kind of power them, and then they go out and they have a bad session, and then they're frustrated for the rest of the day. What does competitive people, how does that work when it comes to their why, and when it comes to, I guess, working through all of what we've just discussed?
I think, I mean, again, and forgive me because I almost sound like a broken record, but it's like, what's underneath the competitiveness, because I'm very competitive. And I used to be very, I'd be the person, like I'd be at the gym and I'd look over at what the person next to me was lifting, and I'd be like, right, and I'd stack some more weights on there, kind of thing, just because I didn't want to be outlifted, and my competitiveness now has kind of shifted towards like, I mean, I have competitions sometimes with people that like they've gotten like they think the competition is how much weight we're lifting,
Right.
but in my head the competition's like, how much can I not allow what they're doing to affect the way that I show up in this session. And so like they might be next to me like, yeah, I'm outlifting her, who knows? But I'm like, no, like we're not playing the same game here, right? So I don't think a competitive energy is a bad thing, but it's just, again, coming back to like what's the why underneath it? Like if the competitiveness is pulling you away from where you're actually wanting to go, then like you're more driven by what other people think, then, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, like there's benefits and losses and things to be gained and things to be that are going to contract us in every situation. It's just having the awareness of it, and sometimes I still let myself fall into like a bit of competitiveness, but I do it with choice, and I think that's the key. Like, don't make yourself wrong if you're like, right, can I beat this person? But own it, like really choose it, because it's not the behavior itself that is detrimental. A lot of the time it's what we make the behavior mean. If we sit there and we go, oh my God, like I ended up, I got distracted and I got competitive with that person and, ended up like off track for the session that I had planned. That's so frustrating, then all of a sudden, like we're losing the magic in the experience, and that's the thing that's actually having us go into a stress response, rather than just going like, you know what, in that moment, it felt really good to just get a bit competitive with the person next to me and try and outlift them. And I'm going to own that, then it's a game.
I
It's
guess
a game
it's how
rather
you
than a
use
fight.
it,
Yeah.
right? Like, and that's such a good example, because I think like you can use competitiveness for your advantage,
Yes.
really. And I think it's probably the opposite, where, like you were saying, it's where people let it distract themselves sometimes from the goal. Because I hear the example all the time, like when it comes to business as well, being so competitive and like, just I think it makes people sometimes a poor sport as well. Like, I always told myself when I started my business, for example, that it's a big world. I don't need to be the only running company. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be other running companies. They're going to kill it. And it's a big enough world for multiple people to kill it, or multiple businesses to win. And I think like I now use competitiveness to, I guess, better my business and better myself, because I see somebody else release, or a business that I'm following release, let's say a shirt that I really like, and I'm like, oh, do you know what, that's really cool, but I'm gonna make it a little bit better than that, and that's not like an ego bet or anything like that. That's just a better, like, I'm just going to use that to my advantage for my business, really. And I think like you have to shift your mind sometimes like that. And I think like a lot of people sometimes that might get frustrated because they're letting the competitiveness, I guess, ruin their performance, is probably just not shifting it as they can, really.
Yeah. Well, what I hear in your share is like, there's a saying that I love, which is a rising tide lifts all boats. And so like I train in jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I see this really interesting dynamic in Brazilian jiu-jitsu where it's shifting now, but previously, like gyms would be like, we don't want you to go, say you were a member at one gym. We don't want you to go train at this other gym because you're going to take the secrets of our gym to their gym. And then they're going to figure it out and get, that gym's going to get taught it. And then we lose our competitive edge. And I can see where there's truth in that. But at the same time, I'm like, well, hang on. If I take our gym's secrets to their gym and they figure it out, and then one of their members takes the secrets they've figured out against our secrets and brings it back, like, we have to figure out how to mitigate that, right? And so we're just making each other better. And so again, I think that when competitiveness comes from scarcity, like we don't want them to find out what we're doing here because then they'll beat us. It's like, that is fear. That is your stress response, right? Versus when competitiveness is like, yes, like this is an opportunity. This is going to make me better. When they're better, I get better. When I get better, they get better, and we all just get to build. That's abundance, and that's when we're in what I call, scientifically ventral vagus state. I call it safety state. It's where we're in our power, we're relaxed. We're not gripping against life. We're in trust. We know that everything is kind of rigged in our favor, that everything's proof that we're getting what we want. And so, I don't think being competitive is a bad thing at all. I just think it's what we make it mean.
Yeah. No, I love that example. I love it because I think too, like a lot of when it becomes fear, that is what I think breaks a lot of things and a lot of systems and a lot of trust too. Because I think too, if you're a business or if you're an individual, like it is very apparent how you're behaving is because you're afraid of, you know, losing, I don't know, if it's the gym example, members, or losing this or that. I think fear does a lot of things to businesses, to people, and it's negative, really, in a sense. And anything negative at the end of the day is not going to be good, really. When it comes to the nervous system, when it comes to these practices, what are some things that you've had to focus on with yourself?
I think a lot of my nervous system work has been around money.
Okay.
Yeah, like around, you know, I would say, and I'm hesitant to even kind of claim this label for myself, but I think I'm the black sheep of the family.
Okay.
And so, you know, like my work is largely, I think it's very much ahead of its time. It's not understood. It's definitely not understood within my family dynamic. Not because I have anything necessarily against it. It's just my family are very, you know, like mainstream business, you know, like putting food on the table, that kind of, you know, real tangible products. And so what I do is like, what? Is this witchcraft, you know? And so for me, because I haven't had within my family dynamic examples of a business like mine working, and I also haven't really had, I mean, this is changing now because this work is becoming more widely recognized and widely, you know, there's more and more practitioners who are in kind of like parallel lines of work who are succeeding, you know. But for a long time, you know, I've been in this work for 15 years. So you imagine 15 years ago, what I was doing was like people would look me dead in the eye and say, that's bullshit. Like, you know, your mindset does not affect your performance at all. And so, yeah, for me, building this business was like feeling around in the dark, you know? And so I think that created for me this real like tension and scarcity around money and like around, you know, like I had an ex-boyfriend once tell me that I was living a fantasy, you know, and he was like, one day you're going to wake up that it's a pipe dream and it's never going to happen. And so I've kind of been told some variation of that from a lot of close people in my life for as long as I've been in the business. And so it's really been teaching myself that there is safety in, you know, innovating, and that it's okay to make good money doing something that you love. That's a big one. You know, there's a lot of, you know, like people make good money, but they hate it. Yeah. You know, they make good money, but they're burnt out. They make good money, but they're, you know, just exhausted, you know? And so obviously my work is around helping people really feel relaxed and anchored and in love with their lives. And so it's like trying to condition myself that it's not wrong of me to make good money and be really happy and in love with my work. You know, it's not wrong of me to, it's not some disloyalty to, you know, my family lineage if I'm not in struggle. You know, if I'm making money and loving it. You know, it's not like I don't need to feel guilty for that because it's just, it's the path that I've chosen. And the truth is we've all got access to it. Like we've all got access to be able to, it might require creativity. It might require resourcefulness. It might require having the courage to do things a little bit differently, you know, and to like the trial and error. But I think we all have access to a lifestyle or creating a lifestyle that not only is abundance, creates abundance materially speaking, but also feels good. So yeah, I would say that's been my main thing, building safety around money.
Okay. I think it like goes back to like you were discussing earlier today as well. Like we live in such a different world now. Like I think we have so much opportunity these days. And I think like going from high school to uni to get a job is less of the normal. It's still, I guess, more of the normal these days, but it's becoming less of the normal, right? I think like I'm quite similar in the sense where my family is very like they've gone to uni and that's what they educated me and my sister, you know, you go to high school, you go to uni, and I did that as well, but they don't understand, oh well, you want to like you're leaving physio and you're doing this podcast in your business, like what does that how are you gonna pay for this X, Y, and Z? Or like, oh, you don't want to own a home right away, or oh, you
Mm.
don't want to do this. And like, I think not having that traditional quote unquote path
Mm.
is scary because it's just unknown, I think, a lot of the
Yeah.
times. But um it sounds like you've pushed through, you've persevered through that, really.
Mm.
And I think that's where sometimes people can go wrong is I think it's easier to then give in, and it's easier to just walk away because, everybody's telling you to do it.
Mm.
But things are not going to be an overnight success, really. It takes the 15 years
Mm.
sometimes to get to where you are now. It takes, for this podcast, for example, 8 years for it to, get to where it is. Like, it takes time. And I think, like, everybody is looking for the quick
Mm.
fixes these days.
Yes.
But it sounds like with everything that you've discussed, like, it is work.
Mm.
It is like when you're working on the nervous system, when you're working on all of these things, all of these fears, all of the fights, all of the flights, like it is work, and you have to recognize these things
Mm.
before, you can actually get over to the next path, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just find that concept quite interesting, and your story is quite amazing because I think like it takes the 15 years really for people to be quote unquote successful, really.
Mm.
And a lot of the times, going back to my example, like if you look at Nike, for example, or you look at like all of these big business owners, like they did not launch and they were not successful, like, within a year.
Mm.
Even it takes the 15 or however long
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. Well, they say the overnight success, 10 years in the making. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, where can people find you? Where can people follow you? And we'll put all of that in the show note for you listening as well.
Yeah. So search my name, Instagram, Facebook. I think I'm there on YouTube, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Briana Bowley.
Okay, perfect. And that'll be in the show note for you listening. So definitely check that out. And I want to thank you for chatting with me today, for chatting with the listener today. This was great. I think this topic is always so interesting because, like you were saying, it's grown over the last 15-ish years, really. And I come from a place like back in Vancouver, and North America in general, like I find Australia is maybe 10 years behind in a lot of this stuff. I recently had somebody come on about peptides and all of that. And all of this stuff is things that I have been exposed to back in North America. And it's quite interesting that now it's evolving here in Australia. So that's why I love talking about it, really, because like I think it's such a new market here and it's so important. It's such an important market. So yeah, thank you for enlightening us and coming on to the show today.
Thanks for having me on.